Alright, it's Barry, and today on Grow It, I've got everything you need to know to grow your own potatoes. Potatoes are the fourth most important crop in the world, with around 5 million tonnes grown in the UK alone every year, and there's 380 million tonnes grown worldwide. You might not know it, but potatoes are actually related to tomatoes, and they're part of the same family, which is the nightshades. Once the flowers on your potato plants are pollinated, they do actually develop fruit that look exactly like green cherry tomatoes, although I definitely wouldn't recommend eating them because they're packed with solanine, which is an especially nasty poison and can cause some pretty bad side effects, including death. It's a naturally occurring chemical defense system in nightshade plants, so it is there in your tomatoes and your aubergines, but their fruits are perfectly safe to eat. This is the same reason why you shouldn't eat potatoes that are going green, because that green colour does indicate that there is an increased amount of solanine in the potato and it can make you ill. Potatoes originate from Peru and South America, and they were first domesticated around 7,000 to 10,000 years ago, and they were first brought to Europe by the Spanish in the 16th century. It seems crazy to think that such a staple food vegetable wasn't even introduced into the UK until 400 years ago. It seems like one of those things that you'd think had been here forever. But before we look at all the different types of potatoes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to keep up to date with all of my videos throughout the year, with loads of guides and ideas to make sure that you get the most out of your garden in 2021, including your potatoes. There are around 4,000 varieties of potatoes and 80 commercial varieties that are available in the UK. In general, varieties are categorised into a few main groups based on a number of common characteristics, such as russet potatoes, which have rough brown skin, red potatoes, white potatoes, yellow potatoes and purple potatoes. When it comes to picking potatoes for eating, they're usually categorised by the consistency, so more floury potatoes that are best used for baking, they normally have around 20% starch content, whereas your waxy potatoes that are best for boiling and roasting, they normally come in at around 16% starch. The two component parts of starch, amylose and amylopectin, also play a really big part in how potatoes cook, depending on the ratio of the two. Amylose diffuses from the starch during the boiling process, and that is what makes potatoes especially good for mashing. Whereas varieties that contain a slightly higher ratio of amylopectin actually retain the shape better when they're boiled, which makes them better for roasting. So now it's time to pick the types of potatoes that you want to grow. You might have heard the term seed potatoes before, and they're not actually seeds, they're just the type of small potato tubers that we plant in the ground when we want to grow some more. So this is a seed potato, and it's a small tuber, and it's been specifically grown and bred to be disease-free for planting in the ground for growing more potatoes. So you don't want to be going to the supermarket and picking up a bag of spuds and sticking them in the ground, because they haven't been bred to be disease-free, and they can just introduce a load of disease and you'll end up with a load of really horrible rubbish plants. So yeah, it's not necessarily as good an idea. I mean, it's possible, but you're much better off spending your time growing a proper pack of seed potatoes, because you know that the results are going to be much better and you're not taking that risk on buying manky spuds. Normally you get them in the garden centres and hardware stores earlier on in the year, so January time round about now is the best time to go in and have a look and see which ones they've got and see which varieties that you want to grow. And when you go in the shop and you're having a look at all the different varieties that they've got, it's worth knowing when you plan on planting them, depending on the seasonal variety, so that you know which ones that are best to buy now. And you can calculate that, so you're looking around 6 to 8 weeks before you start planting them is when you start getting them ready. So when you're in the shop, have a look at them in the bag, and make sure there isn't loads of sprouts, make sure they're not soft, make sure that they're just really nice potatoes and they look good in the pack and they're not mouldy or anything. So you can normally see them, they're normally like a netted bag. So do have a look at those and make sure that you're getting some really nice quality seed potatoes. Which brings me on to the seasonal varieties of potatoes, and the three most common types of potatoes that you'll normally see, it's written on the front of the pack: first early, second early and main crop. This gives you a generally rough idea of the best time of year to plant them in the ground, and it also gives you a really good idea of how long they're going to take to mature, ready to harvest. So we've got first earlies, or sometimes called new potatoes, and they're called the first because they're the first to crop. These are best planted from early March with frost protection, and they're usually ready to harvest in June, taking around 10 to 12 weeks to mature. Some great varieties of first early potatoes are Red Duke of York, Iron Pilot and Rocket. And then next up, it's time to put in your second earlies, which are normally ready to go in a couple of weeks later. Second earlies usually take around 10 to 14 weeks to mature, so planting them from late March to April will produce a good July harvest. Ideal varieties for second early crops are Charlotte, Kestrel and Maris Peer. And then finally you've got your main crop varieties, and these take a bit more time to grow, so these take 16 to 24 weeks before they're ready to harvest, and they need a bit more space to grow as well. These are best planted in mid to late April, and they usually be ready to harvest in August to September. And some of the more commonly known potatoes are main crops such as Maris Piper and King Edward. And now that you've chosen the type of potato that you want to grow, or the types of potatoes, you know the best time of the year to plant them, you can also start to plan the best time to start them off. The best way to start off your potatoes is a process called chitting, which is basically allowing your seed potatoes to grow sprouts before you plant them in the ground. And it's time for me to start off my first earlies, so I'll show you the quickest and easiest way to do that right now. So as you can see, the first thing we start off with is a bag of seed potatoes, and these ones are like 3 for a tenner. And as you can see on the front, I've got Pentland Javelin, and these are the ones that I'm going to be doing this year. And then on the back you've got your general instructions like your planting depth and the planting distance. And the only other thing you need is an egg box or some other kind of potato holding receptacle, and one like this will do for like 15 eggs, but obviously you can use multiples of smaller boxes. And all I'm going to do is just empty these potatoes into this end of the box. Oh. And that has destroyed my heater. And what you're looking for, as we can see with this potato, is the eyes that are usually just on one end, and this is where your sprouts are going to be growing from. So all you're going to do is stand them up in your egg box just like this, and there we go. See, that one's quite a good one for an example. There's quite a few on that one. Yeah, they're only on one end, and stick it in your egg box, and that's all you're going to do. So I'm going to do this for all of these. Yeah, that's the same. I'm going to stick that one in there. There we go, and they are all done. I had a few left over, so I've just stood them up here at the back, but they'll be absolutely fine. And all you've got to do now is leave these in a nice warm sunny position for around 4 to 6 weeks, and you'll start seeing those shoots growing, and they'll be ready to go in the ground. And as you can see with this one that I've got here, this is what you'll be looking at maybe after a couple of days to a week. You'll start seeing these lumpy, spiky sprouts coming out of the top of your potatoes, and that is exactly what you're looking for. So when you see those coming, you know that you're doing it right. And the best thing to do when you're planting these out is to look at the packaging for the ideal planting distances, just for the variety that you've got, because it can vary between different types. I've been planting my potatoes in these raised beds that I've built especially for growing my potatoes this year, and I've got one each for first earlies, second earlies and main crop. These contain a mix of compost and sawdust from the guinea pigs, which makes an ideal growing media for potatoes. And I grew my potatoes in mostly sawdust with a layer of compost on top in 2019, and he went absolutely mad, so I'll be sticking to that this year for hopefully the same result. Now, I was going to do a demo today, and I've got a couple of potatoes that I was going to plant in this bed just to show you how I do it in like a zigzag pattern, but it's been absolutely freezing for the last couple of days, and this bed is absolutely frozen solid, so there's nothing going in there today. So what I'll do in a couple of weeks' time, once my first earlies are ready to go out, I'll do a follow-up video and I'll show you how to plant them in the ground as well. So that's all there is to it, and hopefully now you've got everything you need to know to grow some amazing potatoes yourself this year. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so in a couple of weeks' time you don't miss the next part when these are ready to go into the ground, and I'll show you how to do that. And also to keep up to date with all of my other gardening videos throughout the year. And if you're going to be growing some potatoes yourself, don't forget to let me know in the comments which varieties you're going to be growing yourself, and I'll see you next time.